Welcome, everybody, to the 2025 WNBA Finals presented by YouTube TV. We'll begin with remarks from Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, and then we'll turn.
What happens when the most recognizable athlete in America is earning less from her professional league than someone working a regular office job? Sounds absurd, almost impossible to believe. But that is exactly the reality that came into focus when Caitlin Clark's WNBA rookie contract became public. The moment those salary details surfaced, the reaction was explosive. What should have been a triumphant entry into professional basketball turned into a national debate that put the entire league under intense scrutiny. This was no longer simply about one player being underpaid. It became a larger story about a system that suddenly looked outdated, leadership that appeared overwhelmed, and a league forced to explain why its biggest star was being compensated so far below her apparent value. By the time Caitlin Clark was selected first overall, expectations were enormous. She was not entering the WNBA as just another top prospect. She was arriving as the most discussed name in basketball, a player who had transformed women's college sports into a mainstream obsession. Fans assumed a star of that magnitude would receive a contract that reflected her impact. Instead, the numbers shocked nearly everyone. Her 4-year rookie agreement totaled a little more than $338,000, and her salary for the first season stood at only $76,535. That number spread across the internet instantly. To many people, it did not just seem low. It seemed ridiculous. Comparisons to the NBA poured gasoline on the outrage. Players taken at the very end of the NBA draft, many of whom will never become household names, can earn more in one season than Clark would make from her rookie WNBA contract in several years. That contrast made the situation look even more glaring. The public response was fierce. Television analysts discussed it nonstop. Social platforms were filled with disbelief. Even political figures joined the conversation. Suddenly, the WNBA had everyone's attention, but not in the way it would have wanted. Instead of celebrating the arrival of its most valuable new attraction, the league found itself defending a salary structure that looked painfully out of step with modern sports economics. As criticism intensified, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert attempted to contain the damage. But rather than calming the situation, her comments created even more frustration. Instead of directly addressing the salary issue in a way that felt honest and satisfying, she leaned into broader talking points about league progress. She highlighted charter flights, marketing opportunities, and player benefits beyond base pay. While those things do matter, they completely missed the heart of the controversy. To the public, it sounded like avoidance. People were not asking whether travel conditions had improved. They were asking how the league's most valuable new star could be paid such a modest salary. By focusing on side issues instead of the core problem, the response felt corporate, defensive, and disconnected from what fans were actually upset about. Rather than reassuring the audience, it gave the impression that the league was trying to talk around an uncomfortable truth. And that truth became even more revealing once people looked beyond her WNBA contract. Because Caitlin Clark's actual financial power had very little to do with the salary she was receiving from the league. Long before she played her first professional game, she had already become a marketing giant. Reports surrounding her endorsement portfolio painted a dramatically different picture. Her Nike deal alone, widely rumored to be worth around $28 million over 8 years, reportedly included the type of signature shoe arrangement usually reserved for only the biggest global stars. Add in partnerships with brands like Gatorade, State Farm, and Panini, and the contrast became impossible to ignore. The league was paying her roughly $76,000. While the outside market was valuing her at tens of millions. That imbalance exposed something deeply uncomfortable for the WNBA. It showed that Clark was not dependent on the league to establish her fame or earning power. In fact, the opposite seemed true. The league was benefiting from her arrival far more dramatically than she was benefiting from the league's salary structure. She had not become famous because of the WNBA. She had entered it as an already established phenomenon, and her presence immediately changed the visibility and commercial energy surrounding the entire sport. Every increase in ratings, every sold-out crowd, every surge in merchandise demand made that reality more obvious. She was not merely participating in the league's growth. she was accelerating it. And with each sign of that impact, the gap between what she was generating and what she was being paid became harder to defend. The complication, however, is that the WNBA could not simply hand her a bigger contract even if it wanted to. The league operates under a collective bargaining agreement negotiated with the players' union. That agreement sets the framework for salaries, including fixed rules for rookie pay. Clark's contract was not created individually around her stardom. It was determined by a structure already in place before she arrived. That structure came from a very different moment in the league's history. The current CBA was signed in 2020, before anyone could have anticipated a player arriving with this kind of cultural force. It was built to support steady progress, financial caution, and a league still working to strengthen its long-term footing. It was not designed for the sudden arrival of a player capable of dramatically reshaping audience interest, media attention, and commercial leverage almost overnight. That is why this controversy is larger than one salary. The WNBA is caught between two realities. On one side, it must follow a negotiated system that applies across the league. On the other, it is dealing with a player whose impact has already outgrown that system. If the league were to make an exception for Clark, it could disrupt labor relations and create internal conflict with other players. But by following the rules exactly as they exist, it makes itself look unable to properly reward the very person driving its momentum. That is the trap. The WNBA is not just facing criticism because Clark is underpaid. It is facing criticism because the entire structure now appears too limited for the scale of the moment. And the scale of her impact has been extraordinary. Almost immediately, television audiences surged when she was on the screen. Arena demand spiked. Fever games drew attention far beyond what the league was used to seeing. Her jersey sales exploded. In city after city, the excitement surrounding her presence created an energy the WNBA had spent years trying to build. She was not just a talented rookie. She became a commercial engine. Yet that success made the salary issue even more embarrassing. Every ticket sold, every ratings jump, every major headline deepened the contradiction. The player helping create a financial and cultural surge around the league was still tied to a salary that looked tiny compared to the value of what she was producing. That paradox became impossible to hide. The more successful she became, the more outdated the system appeared. At the same time, her arrival created another layer of tension inside the league itself. With so much media focus pouring onto one rookie, the atmosphere around her became complicated. Veteran players who had spent years building the league suddenly found themselves pushed to the background in coverage dominated by Clark's story. That dynamic led to growing debate about resentment, physical play, and whether some of the treatment she received on the court reflected more than routine rookie adjustment. Several moments went viral, especially hard fouls and aggressive plays that many fans viewed as excessive. Some people dismissed it as standard initiation into professional basketball. Others believed it revealed a deeper frustration within the league, where some established players felt overshadowed by the attention being showered on one newcomer. Whether those interpretations were fully fair or not, the perception itself became part of the story. That created yet another challenge for the WNBA. If the league failed to protect its biggest draw, it risked angering the huge wave of new fans following Clark. But if it appeared to give her special treatment, it risked feeding accusations that she was being elevated above everyone else. The situation turned into a delicate balancing act, one that reflected a much broader identity struggle within the league as it tried to adjust to a new level of spotlight. Still, beneath all the noise, there is one major event that could eventually reshape everything: the next media rights deal. This is where the league's future will likely be decided. The WNBA's current television agreement was made before the Caitlin Clark phenomenon changed the scale of public interest. Now, with ratings surging and broader attention flooding in, the league has a far stronger hand than it did before. If the next deal brings in dramatically more revenue, it could open the door to a very different financial reality. More television money would give the league room to negotiate a stronger collective bargaining agreement, increase salaries, improve resources, and finally build a compensation model that looks more aligned with the modern sports marketplace. That is why so much of this moment feels transitional. The current system may be too rigid for Clark, but the next phase of league growth could make major change possible. In that sense, Caitlin Clark's salary controversy is not just a scandal. It is a stress test. It has forced the WNBA to face questions it can no longer avoid. How should a league built for cautious survival respond when it suddenly has a transformational superstar? How does it protect fairness across all players while also recognizing a level of influence that clearly exceeds the old structure? And can its leadership turn this moment of exposure into a foundation for long-term growth? That is what makes this story so significant. Caitlin Clark represents both the WNBA's greatest opportunity and its clearest weakness. She has brought unprecedented visibility, commercial energy, and public attention. But at the same time, her presence has exposed the limitations of the league's financial model, its communication strategy, and its readiness for explosive growth. The WNBA is no longer being judged on potential. It is being judged on how it handles this moment. And that is why this controversy matters so much. It is not really about whether one rookie salary looked too small. It is about whether the league can evolve quickly enough to match the size of the opportunity standing right in front of it.